Just wanted to throw together a really quick and very opinionated video on what knives I feel that we should be using for our younger scouts. So just to cut to the chase, this is an Opinel number 7. This is a number 6. They're fairly small, good size for kids' hand. Number 6 is a little smaller. These are locking blades. This one has a point on it. The lock is this ring that you turn and locks and keeps it. The reason I like these is that when you unlock it, you unlock the blade, and then you can close it like we teach the scouts, and your fingers are never in the path of the blade. And you can also lock it closed. The number 7 comes in the My Kid's First version, I suppose you could call it, which either has the pointed tip like the number 6 has, or you can also have it with this flat tip. The blade is still sharp, but doesn't have the pointy tip on it, a little less poking ability. The real downside on these is that you have to manually lock them. They don't automatically lock. So you open it up and you rotate the clasp here, and then you have to rotate it back. You can close it while keeping your fingers out of the way of the blade. With a lot of knives, you have to. So this is a knife that I carry every day. I really like it because I can open it one-handed and I can close it one-handed. But the problem is we don't teach our scouts to open and close one-handed. Always two hands on the blade. And then with a liner lock like this, so it's a liner lock, this is actually a frame lock, but there's a little tab here that you push to the side and then the blade will close. So my thumb is in the path of this blade as I close it, and I'm coordinated enough to move my finger out of the way so I can close it without my fingers in the way there. But for a young kid who's just learning how to use a knife, that might be a little a little much. It's the same with, this is a particularly large example, but a lockback knife, so it has the button on the back to press. So you open up the blade, and then you press this button in the back, and you close it. And again, my fingers are in the way of this blade here as we close it. I prefer these for younger kids to the liner locks because there's just less time. This is a stiff one. Less time of having the blade or your hand in the way of the blade. So a little better if you're going to go with a locking blade other than the Opinels. I'd recommend a lock back as opposed to the liner or frame lock that these have. There's nothing wrong with getting something like a Swiss Army knife. So this is the Swiss Army knife that I used when I was a scout for a very long time. As you can see, I have no fingernails right now, but here's a newer Cub Scout version. Same kind of thing, or a little one. I've tried this with my 8-year-old. He has difficulty opening these blades. Same with this buck. So he has difficulty grasping the blade and opening them. So there's a lot of struggling and everything. So they're fine. They're usable. If your kid can open it and close it easily, then they're perfectly safe. These are called slip joints. So there's a mechanism in here that keeps this open, so I can smack it against my hand with good amounts of everything, and it won't cut me. I won't close my hand. Do not buy cheap non-locking blades. I've seen them where you can kind of swing like that and the blade will close on its own, and that is absolutely not safe. I have cut myself multiple times on that kind of knife. So something that has a little bit of resistance. This is a Buck, Victorinox. There's a few other decent brands out there to use. Just don't get cheap ones. So like I said, these are a little more difficult to open, but there's nothing wrong with that. If you get a Cub Scout, then they have the Cub Scout ones at the scout shops, so those are perfectly fine. These little tiny ones are, a little more difficult to open just because they're small. So you also need fingernails to open these things. So slip joints are fine if that's what you want. You can also get a little Scout pouch to hold your Scout knife in. I've never met a Cub Scout that needs a wine bottle opener. There's ones that come with the screwdrivers on them that are just fine for that kind of stuff. So you can get something called an assisted opener. So this is another liner lock, but this one is not automatic, so it's not that. But there's a little spring in there that will cause this blade to open up on its own. Not on its own, but it's an assisted opening. So if I push on this sub here, there's a spring that'll open it. Avoid assisted openings. I like this knife. This is a nice. I carried this one for a long time up until the lock broke on it and it started opening up in my pocket. So just beware of that. I I like these little short blades. This blade, this is long enough for everything I've needed a knife for. I don't need a knife this big. So this is large for anything that you're gonna have a Cub Scout doing or a younger Scout doing. Even older Scouts are not gonna need. But Scouts get older, they collect large amounts of knives. So something like a 2-3 inch blade is perfectly fine. So this is for cutting open boxes, cutting rope, whittling small things. This works perfectly fine. If you're looking for multi-tools, the Leatherman, these work great. They're a little heavier, a little more expensive. They work fine for opening boxes and things like that. Whittling is a little harder than these, but again, this is a liner lock, so to close it, so just be aware of that. You can get non-locking ones. They will retain the blade open with non-locking because they're a decent quality blade. I would recommend not something like this. In the BSA, we allow fixed blade knives. Individual councils, individual units, and camps will not always allow fixed blade knives. This one's actually been blunted for demonstration purposes, but yeah, so avoid fixed blade knives, especially the Cub Scouts. With the older Scouts, that's a choice that your individual unit can make. A little fixed blade like this, I actually really like this knife. There are some international scouting groups that don't allow folding knives. They prefer a fixed blade knife. So something little like this is all you're going to need for anything that a Scout's going to be doing. I've used this particular knife to make feather sticks for wood. You can cut open boxes, you can cut rope, you can whittle to make your little marshmallow sticks, whatever. It is a fixed blade knife. Not everyone likes fixed blade knives. I would still tend to avoid that for a Scout, but something like this is fine. Whereas, a blade like this, or even you can get, when they get older, they're going to go find a machete somewhere or something like that, and it's going to be a thing. But we avoid fixed blade knives right now. One second. High quality video people here. So, cut proof gloves. These are great. I can take a knife. I can do a fair bit of cutting myself. They're not going to protect from stabs, but they'll protect from cut. This is cloth. The problem with this is when you're whittling, it's going to kind of reduce your dexterity a little bit. And at first, we're not going to be doing a lot of draw cuts towards ourselves or anything like that. So it's not as much of a need for it. In the beginning, it may be useful to teach Scouts that. I notice when I use them, I start to kind of get a little bit of bad habits, but I've been using knives for a very long time, so it's not as problematic, but I'll actually use my hand to stop it and stuff like that. I'm not going to cut myself. If you're concerned about the Scout and whether to cut themselves, use this. You can also use athletic tape and wrap it around your thumb or finger here, so that way if you're doing like a kind of a pairing cut, which we don't teach the younger Scouts pairing cuts like this. We're never cutting towards ourselves. So, but you can wrap tape around your thumb to avoid that. So, gloves, cut-proof gloves are a possibility. This is just a fabric. It's not chainmail or anything, but they can be useful if that's something you're interested in. But a little bit of loss of dexterity and can reinforce bad habits in the beginning because they're not likely to cut themselves, which is good, but light cuts are bad. You can get knives like this that have a short little blade for whittling. Again, a lock back. This one actually, can I? Nope, I can't. Can't close it with hand and blade. So again, to kind of reiterate what I said originally, the Opinel number 6, which is the smallest of their locking blades, has this, they call it a vibra lock. So you unlock it, you open the blade, you lock it again. This actually has a fairly sharp spine, so you can strike ferro rods with it for fire starting. And they're inexpensive, like 15-20 bucks maybe. And they're decent quality, good quality steel. Make sure you get this got to focus on there. It says Inox. So the Inox or stainless editions are what I recommend. They also make carbon steel ones. The carbon steel ones, there's advantages to it, but carbon steel takes a lot more maintenance. So this, if it gets wet, it's not a big deal. So that's number 6. You can also get the number 7, which comes in either the pointed tip or this blunt tip here. So those are my recommendations for knives, these two. Again, something like the Victorinox Swiss Army knife. It's also fine, but we're just kind of looking at the basics here. The kids are, anyone that age is looking at a knife is going to be cutting rope, whittling a fire stick for marshmallows, or opening a box or something like that, opening a package. They're not going to be doing something that's going to require the pull cuts and paring cuts like that, where you're pulling towards yourself, or anything that is large, and we're not cutting through brush or using combat knives or anything there. So those would be my general recommendations for a knife. The Leatherman's fine as well, but again, the concerns that we look out for are how easily a kid that is of that age can open. See, even without fingernails, I have difficulty sometimes opening a blade. This blade's fine length. We teach our scouts to close with an open palm. One thing to watch out for with the really short knives, I don't even know if I can open that one, but so if I close this, sometimes my hand can roll over the tip here, so but the 2-3 inch blade, something on this length, is fine. There's no rules in the BSA about having a knife that's that long or whatever long. Individual councils may have something, but this is just a good utilitarian blade length. Same with the number 6. Open number 6 is that same kind of 2-3 inch length. So that's my recommendation, my opinions and everything. If you have to go with a lock back, if you have to go with a lock other than this, the lock back versus a liner or frame lock, number 6 and number 7 at Opinel, and the Swiss Army knives are perfectly acceptable as well, and they sell these in the Scout Shop. So hopefully that is helpful to everybody.